So everyone, I know that it's a crazy busy week for everybody, so what I thought I would do is just throw another What Sold video out this weekend. I know I'm a couple weeks behind, and I just thought it would be a good chance to try to catch up on some of that, catch up on some of these What Solds and share the things that have sold online in our shops, eBay, Ruby Lane, Etsy, those type of things. So we're looking at the week of November 6th through the 12th, and we're starting with a not so exciting sale. These were a pair of Sorel boots. They only sold for $20. We couldn't find the size marking in these. We have 9 with a question mark, and anyway, they just weren't, if they are a men's 9 or whatever they are, that's not the biggest, most popular size for men's shoes to sell. And so anyway, we just kind of let them go for $20. Not sure where we picked them up. I'm going to say the bins, because that's the type of thing that shows up there fairly often, is in our little clearance thrift store. Next up is this. Oh, I must have started too soon. Okay. It is a Sargent and Company black cast iron tabletop nutcracker. So I just went upstairs and I asked Mr. Pish Posh about some of the things that had sold that he had listed and found, and I somehow skipped this one. But anyway, this is possibly either picked up on a recent thrift trip out of town, or it was on our trip out in going over to Washington back in the early spring, and we stopped at a Habitat for Humanity and picked up some rustic type things like this. And I didn't quite see all the different little tools and bits and bobs that he picked up that day, so it's possible that this was one of those. But anyway, it sold for the full asking price of $25. And those little tools and things that he picked up were just a couple bucks each. And we were discussing this one and we couldn't remember picking it up, but we think it just came from, again, the Bins Clearance Center, because Calvin Klein is not necessarily a brand we pick up or would pay much of anything for. But it was a nice looking piece. It was a sweater, jacket, sweatshirt type thing, full zip, and it sold for $20. Then a baseball hat. This one actually only sold for $14. It was a Nike hat. And again, let's see if I can get a picture of the back. Yeah, you can see it's a fitted hat. Fitted hats are a little bit harder to sell than the adjustable ones. And this was the Tennessee Vols, which is good. It was another, I'm sure, Bins hat. Like I've said before, our hats are either at the, come from the bins, where we pay pennies for them, or they come from Goodwill, which is we pay $2, usually at the most, maybe a little bit less if I'm using a coupon that day. So $14 for that hat. Happy to move it on. Baseball hat sales have slowed down a little bit because of the season change. We were just discussing some of our strategy for listing coming up, and we're going to kind of, baseball hats will sell. There are still people who wear them all year long. So I think any of our really good ones we'll definitely kind of make sure to put on there. But we have other things in our inventory and our unlisted backlog that probably would do better this time of year and would be more worth focusing our time on. And such as flatware, we're like way behind in flatware, dinnerware, things like that. Coffee mugs actually do okay this time of year. So if we're gonna, have whatever time we have, free to list, we're gonna focus on our winter stuff and our better selling stuff for this time of year first, and then we can focus on the other things. That's not to say you have to be totally seasonal. If I, have a pair of sandals that are good sellers, I'll list them because people will still look for that type of thing. they either live in warm climates or they're going on vacation or things like that. But it would make more sense to get winter boots and things like that listed if I have limited time and too much to list, which is pretty much the story of my life. Okay, next up was a fun sale. This is one of my favorite brands of flatware and pieces and dinnerware and kitchenware and type things to sell. It's WMF. And you look for the mark that says WMF Cromargan. So here's a good picture of the mark. So the WMF is usually in a little square. It says Cromargan underneath, Germany. These are salad tongs. I couldn't really find, I couldn't find them in replacements. I found a couple other listings that said that this goes with the flatware pattern Laurel. I kind of just had to take other sellers' word for it because I couldn't find confirmation on that. So I just went ahead. Other people had sold them with that name, but like very few. Like this isn't a very common piece. And so these salad tongs, I believe, were in a bag at Goodwill, a couple bucks, and they sold. I ended up taking an offer for $30 for those. So WMF Cromargan, flatware, anything, it'll do good. Okay, so after my office supply video, you know, whenever I do those deep dive like video type things, it kind of keeps me on the lookout for whatever it is that I've just done a big research dive onto. So I found these pencils. Honestly, this would have done better if all of the packages of pencils were in there. So what had happened is there were supposed to be, I think, 6 packs of pencils. There were 5, but each of those 5 were sealed. But then the package itself had been kind of like taped up again. Well, if it had been full, it would have sold for like $25 or something like that. As it is, there was one missing. I listed for $20, not a whole lot of interest. You know, I got views and things like that, but I sold them for $12. And I think I paid 99 cents for the box. They are, I end up looking... I did look it up in the store, and it's just, it's interesting because I don't know, a lot of times I would just buy that and then my kids would use it, but there are pencil collectors and these were vintage. And so I went ahead and listed those. The good thing is if they hadn't sold, we could have just used them. Unlike some of the other inventory that ends up being duds. Not that I'm saying that was great. $12 is still $12, I guess. Okay, this one did kind of surprise me. I was telling my husband, I said, Star Wars stuff, it's so prolific. And so I wouldn't have expected this hat to sell for $25. But, and I know my husband was the one who picked it up. It wasn't me. I don't think it was the bin. So we agree that it was most likely Goodwill that we got this one at. And it's an X-Wing Pilot Rebel Alliance Snapback, sold for the full asking price of $25. So I said to my husband, I can't believe you got $25 for something Star Wars related that you would think is just everywhere. And he just said that this style is not everywhere, that it was a little bit more unusual. So goes to show what I know about Star Wars. Anyway, we're happy for that sale. Mountain Hardwear, this one's been listed for a little bit. It's a merino wool base layer type shirt. I've talked about Mountain Hardwear before as kind of being not the highest level brand. It's not going to be Arc'teryx or anything like that. But Mountain Hardwear, Outdoor Research, some of those are kind of mid-level and they have a following. And the stuff doesn't sell like super fast. But it does sell eventually. So that sold for the full $25. And we probably did have it listed longer for a higher price, but we went through and kind of dropped prices on stuff that's been sitting for a while. Now here's a towel ring, a vintage hardware, vintage towel ring. We've already had sold the outlet covers and switch covers, I think, that kind of were all together with this set. So this sold, again, $20 is what it sold for. It does, if you kind of look down here, it does look like it has a little bit of discoloration right there. But just such a cute little design and sunflower type design. And another person bought all of the outlet covers, switch covers, and I got this stuff at an estate sale. I think I told you before that it was in the bathroom, and I was asking if it was for sale, and it might even have still been on the wall. And I just asked if, you know, with an estate sale, they were emptying out the whole house. And I said, are you looking to sell these pieces? And the lady running the sale was like, yeah, I thought I might actually take those home and use them. And I said, all right, that's fine. That's okay. And she says, no, I'll sell them. So we got it, got it all off the wall and everything. And I don't know, I think she charged me like $6 for all of it. So good deal. This one I was supposed to take off because they actually never paid for it. And I forgot to take it off. But then I was like, you know what? I'll just show it to you. It sold for $12, so don't worry about it being a bolo or anything like that or something to look for. But just to kind of give you the idea that sometimes people just don't pay. So we canceled it. It's probably something that we'll just end up donating at some point. And then look who's back. Our little Miss No Name. So, you've seen her in a What Sold video before, and you've also seen her probably in my video that I did about problems that resellers face when reselling goes wrong. And this was just something that got returned to me, and no note, no information about it, why they were returning it. And I could have been a stinker and I could have just not refunded because it was totally done outside of eBay. But, it kind of seemed like an older lady type thing that was happening. I could, you can kind of tell from handwriting. And like they just were kind of clueless, right? So I just went ahead and refunded, not the shipping, not the return shipping, obviously. I just refunded the exact amount. And then I forgot about it. And I kept seeing her. She was still wrapped up out in the garage. Because we didn't want her back in the house. And I saw her little feet. I kept seeing her little feet in the garage. And I'm like, I got to relist that. So I did. And it sold again for $89.99. Full asking price. And I think this is lower than I listed it the first time. Her condition is not so great. And the other one I sold was better because it had the original dress and things like that. So I just dropped it to $89.99, hoping it would move quickly and out of the house again. And it did. So far so good. Like I said, this is a couple weeks ago and I haven't heard anything. She hasn't shown up back on my doorstep. And if she does, I don't know. I just think I might donate her. I don't think I can handle that again. Okay, interesting hat. This one is a hat I picked up at the bins, and we were just talking about this and how my husband said he looked at this. He said he would not have picked this hat up. I should say it didn't sell for $50, but it sold for $35, which is actually pretty good for a hat. So I saw this at the bins and I'm like, Nacional. And I'm like, okay, don't know what that means. You kind of look on the side, there's kind of like a embroidered signature. And that actually says the Aon Senna. Anyway, it was new. It was clean. All that kind of stuff. Made in Brazil. So in my mind, I was like, well, maybe this is like a soccer team, Brazilian soccer team, or I don't know. That's kind of what was my thinking. And it's the bins. And like I've said before, I'm paying pennies. So I'm more willing to take chances on things in that situation. So we brought it home, and so my husband did the quick research and he was like, okay, he figured out what it was. This actually has to do with Formula One racing, and Ayrton Senna was a champion of this, F1. Now, this was back like in the 90s or so. And so if you find a hat from back then, we're talking big money, right? So we just looked on WorthPoint. There was one that was actually signed by him, sold for thousands. And then, but if you go down to just kind of generic hats from the 90s, they're selling for $150, $200, things like that. This one was a repro. So it's a newer hat. They're just making it in that same style. But it still had value. So it sold for $35. So Formula One, I think, is definitely going to be a little bit higher in general for like reselling, like a reselling theme than like NASCAR or something like that. But I'm sure there's exceptions to all those. And I know nothing about it. I'm just glad I went with my gut. My husband said he wouldn't even have picked it up. And then this one is something my husband did pick up. He said he paid about $6. We were just kind of on a little road trip to do something and stopped at a thrift store or to visit friends, I think. And so we were it's like an hour away, and we hit some thrift stores. And he picked up this one. This is by Fairway Replicas. So it's kind of a bolo to keep an eye out for. We'll look at some other examples in a minute. This one actually sold for $40, and it sold pretty quickly. This is Cypress Point Golf Course. It's the 16th hole. So if you look at them in general, okay, there's some, like this one's made into a lamp, and it's the Augusta National 13th hole. Augusta again, Amen Corner, that, that's a higher price. Some of these are on top of like jewelry boxes or have a clock or things like that. Here's the one we sold, but it's a jewelry box, $60. And then you can see Cypress Point, is a popular one. So ours sold for $40 very quickly. So Fairway Replica is something to kind of keep an eye out for. And another tool. I told my husband I was going to say to you guys that I realized that at this point you're probably like, how many tools does this man have? And he said to tell you, Mr. Pishbosh said to tell you that there's more coming. So he did actually buy this from a friend because he thought he would have use for it. So he did get it secondhand. He thought there was something that he was going to be able to do with countertops, and then realized he wasn't ever going to do it. And he probably wouldn't end up using this. And so I don't know how much he paid the friend. It sold for $145. This could have just been a break-even kind of deal. Anyway, so that's what that was for. So sold for $145. Next up, this also came from our bins clearance center. It's a 1970s faux leather camera case. It was actually fairly large size, and it only sold for $25. It also came with this other camera case that was like custom made, where you could put like a long zoom lens into the case. And so he got the two of them together. So it was a, nice looking little camera case from back in the day, and somebody wanted it and paid quite a bit of shipping actually to get it. So $25. Okay, this is something I can address because I did get a question about this on one of my last videos. So you're looking at $25 sold for, and the shipping shows as $12.27. So when you're seeing my what sold screen, it's showing you the shipping as if it was shipping to myself, to my zip code. So that's not the shipping that the buyer has paid. So from what I can see on my phone, the buyer paid about $19 for shipping on that. I think we did ground advantage. So just a FYI, someone was wondering why it looked like I got really good shipping prices, and that's because it was just showing shipping to my zone, my zip code. Okay, that's just how that screen works. Then this is the best sale of the week, right? So this is the one that was on my thumbnail. And as you can tell, my son, I don't know, can you tell? My son is still doing my thumbnails. And I was like, okay, honey, I'm not like a gaming channel, so let's tone it down a little bit, but it makes him happy, so it's all good. So he did the thumbnail, and you saw this in the thumbnail, and it's kind of hard to figure out what it is. I saw this at the shelf at a local thrift store, not a Goodwill, and I just was like, that is really cool. So it's like a chunk of wood carved to look like a log, and then it had all sorts, but it was a jewelry box, and I could tell that the velvet was really old inside. The hinges looked really old. It didn't have like a lock, the lock mechanism, key, whatever, I don't think was working. And then the other issue was up here on the top, it's kind of got like ivy, and that one little part of the leaf was broken off. She couldn't really, like, I couldn't really tell too terribly. But as you can see, the keyhole, all the other carving, it was just really cool. And so when I saw it, I was like, you know, the term Black Forest popped into my head. And I'm not a big antique dealer. What I come across more is vintage type things, not quite such old stuff, but I have seen other things, and I watch Antiques Roadshow, and so Black Forest popped into my head as far as the style and the type of wood and like where this maybe came from. And so we were able to find similar ones, different comps, and my husband was like, yeah, the prices on these are like crazy. So I paid $12. I don't think I got half off that day. I'm thinking I paid the full $12. I just had a feeling about it, and I just thought it was something special. I love especially that the side of it just looks so cool, the carving done on it. So we had it listed for a little while and took an offer for $225. So that was our big score, our big win for the week. Actually, leave me a comment down below if you would have picked that up. Would you have noticed that? Would you have picked it up? And would you have known right away what it was? Sometimes I'm just going by my gut, and then I'm happy when I get home and I'm like, oh yeah, it is something. And then sometimes I've been around a while and I know. So it's always fun, always an adventure. So another problem I just decided to show you, even though this one is going to be a return and it's coming back to me, but I did learn something that I think I need to be a little more clear about sizing of vintage items. So you kind of expect that you're going to have people buying vintage clothes are vintage collectors, and they're going to know this, but not necessarily so. Especially Pendleton still makes their clothing, and so people are used to buying, current Pendleton. They might not realize that a size 10p in vintage sizing is going to be different than a 10p today. And so that's, I think, what happened here. So she was like, she bought it and she was just like, oh, this is way smaller than the other size 10s that I've bought. And I just have, like I've said in that other video about problems, I just have automatic returns. It's automatically approved for them to return it. And anyway, what I think I need to do, even though I tried in this listing, as you can see in the title, I have size 10p, 27-inch waist. So I tried in the title to kind of give an indication of the size of this skirt. But I think right there where condition shows up instead of just condition, I think the very first, at the beginning of that part, I probably will have to say something about this is a vintage size 10. Please see measurements and compare to your piece of clothing. Like, I think I have to be a little bit more clear, because I've had a couple vintage pieces where I think the other one might have been Poshmark, and she didn't return it, but she just gave me a bad rating and just said, oh, the size was totally not a size 8, And it was like, okay, you obviously don't buy vintage clothing very often, so they didn't know that. Okay, so I just have to make it a little bit more clear. So you can learn from me and try to do that on your vintage clothing listings. See if it helps. We know people don't read. Now, this was also an interesting hat that we sold that was, it was funny because it was at Goodwill. My husband picked it up and bought it. And I had already kind of scanned the hats real quick, but I knew he was shopping with me, and I knew he would like want to look and be more thorough. So I saw the word set in stone, and I saw like the signature, but I didn't stop to try to figure out what the signature said. Like, knowing it says Travis Tritt, it's really obvious right now. But, you know, with the quick scan, I'm like, set in stone. I'm like, well, that's either a religious local church kind of hat, or it's like a stone company that's like local. That's what went through my head. So I left it. Then my husband came by with the cart, and he's holding it. And so I was like, he must know what it is. And so he obviously saw that it was Travis Tritt. Now, what was interesting is that he said there was nothing, this was Set in Stone's kind of a current album for him. And he said there was no other listings on eBay. So he's like, when he did more research, when he got home, he's like, you know what, this was probably a dud. Went ahead and listed it anyway. And of all the cool hats we got that day, it sold first for $25. So, that just goes to show, like, you know, sometimes our guts work against us as well. And, you know, don't underestimate fan bases for things. So the fact that there wasn't one was probably a good thing, because somebody who went to that concert, you know, missed out on getting something and found it pretty quickly on eBay. Okay. Carhartt. Let's talk vintage Carhartt. Now, there is a jacket, a style jacket from Carhartt that's called the Detroit jacket, and that one is the hot seller right now. That'll sell for like $200. This one, I just thought, look, it's a 2XL. It's a good color. It's got a corduroy collar. It's moss green. It's just like, this has got so much going for it. And we listed it high. And holy cow, nobody wanted this jacket. It's been listed for like a year or more. And I'm like, it's vintage Carhartt. Like, look at it. It's awesome. It's a good size. And I guess it's blanket lined as well, right? So I don't know if the chore coat look just isn't a thing right now. Or we were discussing that maybe the people who want it are actually want it for chores, you know, and they're not going to spend. It's not a trendy thing. They're not going to spend money for a trend. They just want a usable coat. So we ended up selling this for $50 just because it was the first offer kind of interest that we got. And so we took it. Crazy. And then this is a shower tub replacement handle. My husband picked it up to flip from somewhere, you know, a while back. And he says that whenever he can find like electrical or plumbing replacement pieces, a lot of times those can be, you know, worth picking up. He said electrical does a little bit better, but, you know, for kind of a bread and butter type thing. This sold for that full $12.99. I only had 2 sales on Poshmark. Again, this is the week after I got back from my trip, and I still was it took me a while to get back in the groove of everything. And so I still wasn't listing a ton or cross-listing into Posh. And so you can see the results of not listing new things into Poshmark is very low sales. This is a photo album. It was new. It was Creative Memories. It was, you know, I picked it up a long, long time ago. It's been listed a long, long time. And Creative Memories used to be kind of a no-brainer to pick up and resell, but now not so much. So this only sold for $11. I was just happy I could find it, and I was happy somebody even cared enough to want it. And another slow seller, which surprised me, was this vintage Woolrich, very cottagecore, grannycore, country kind of looking. It was Woolrich. It was a good brand. It was vintage. It had a goose on it. Like, Like who wouldn't want that? It was 100% wool. The problem might have been it was a size small. I don't know. But I had it on all sorts of platforms, and I was so happy when I got a $33 offer on Poshmark. Still a good price, but yeah, it took a while. So it finally sold. Now there was a few sales over on Ruby Lane, which is where I'm at, and unfortunately I cut off this side of it, but you can kind of see it's vintage Barbie bubble cut wig is what this is. You can see how little it is. This was just in a part of like a bunch of different Barbie type things that I picked up at a yard sale last year or maybe the year before. But I did list quite a few of these things, little outfits and things like that, kind of around when the movie came out. So this was just $10, but little bubble cut wig from back in the day for Barbie. Sold some flatware. This is Gorham is the brand. The pattern was called Quintet. I decided to try these on Ruby Lane, and it was nice. They, it wasn't like a huge sought after pattern, so it was just kind of nice to. And then look, it was like 3 iced teaspoons and 5 cocktail forks, so it's just kind of randomness that I threw together, and that sold for $20, so 8 pieces, so a little over $2 a piece, which is nice. This was $22 for this Arizona souvenir scarf that was vintage. And yeah, I had a bit of a scare because I couldn't find it. But I think when I had done that Western sale on Facebook, I pulled it out as a potential one to put on there, and I ended up not putting it on there. But it never got put back where it was supposed to go, but it was just sitting in plain sight on the shelf, but it just took me so long to find it. And so that's what today is all about. We are working on organizing some inventory and cleaning out the garage so I can actually park in it because it's been freezy frosty and it's long overdue. So we're trying to do a few projects. I just thought I would try to get this video done today before I go help put stuff away. And last but not least on Ruby Lane was this. It was David Michael China. It was just this very pretty coffee mug. It's fine bone china from Staffordshire. I'd never heard of the maker before, and I don't know. I'm not even sure what made me pick it up. I just thought it was pretty. Bluebells, those can kind of always be a popular motif for people, especially Texans, if I am correct, and if that is actually a bluebell. Okay, Etsy, over in the Metal and Tweed shop on Etsy. A couple mugs. These were matching mugs, and we ended up selling them together. I think I had sold this one. I found it one other time, and I sold it, and so I found 2 more. I believe it's Otagiri. I don't think there was any markings or stickers or anything like that, but it had that look. And you can see they're identical mugs. So you're seeing one side on one mug and one side on the other. So it's kind of this school of fish that gets bigger and bigger and just really cool. So $24 for those. And then the hunting theme is there's no scarcity of this hunting theme in the things I find in Montana in the thrift stores, but this was just a belt buckle from 1990. The brand is Bergamot Fine Art Foundry of Wisconsin, and not worth a whole lot, but it sold for $16. And another theme we have no shortage of in Montana is horses. So I had picked up 2 of these, and actually both of them ended up selling in the Etsy shop. $15 for this stoneware horse. There was no maker on the bottom. It was a very kind of petroglyph, cave painting style of the horse, which I think made it stand out a little bit. But even with no name, they both sold, and that was $15 for that mug.
And don't forget, I do have coffee mug videos. This is a good time of year to try to kind of get coffee mugs listed. I feel like the demand for coffee mugs picks up in the fall and winter, just as people are drinking more hot drinks. And anyway, and possibly breaking them and needing replacements. Okay, and the last sale of the week was this mid-century copper tone by Miro. Copper colored aluminum, most likely with a white lid, and it was a grease canister. And it's sold for $14, as you can see. No big deal, just a tiny little canister, but I do like to pick up, if the grease ones are in good condition, I do like to pick those up. They're a little bit harder to find than like the coffee or the whatever. Anywho, those were my sales of the week, so I got to get going and get some work done, but I, as always, am looking forward to your comments. Hit the thumbs up. All those types of things helps the algorithm push my video out to more people so that we can keep going with this. And my, yeah, so anyway, as usual, as I was saying, was go ahead and leave me a comment below about your best sale of the week, how sales have been for you. Are they slow? What's going on? And I will see you in the comments.